There was a time when Earth was just a blue dot on the edge of a forgotten spiral arm, a flicker of electromagnetic noise lost in the void. In every official galactic database, humanity was categorized as a Level 2 civilization, primitive, barely spacefaring, and still shackled by internal division. No one expected anything from Earth. No one feared it. And that, more than anything, was the mistake. I was there when everything changed. My name is Commander Blake Torres, formerly of the U.S. Navy's Silent Service. Submarine warfare taught me to hunt in the deepest, darkest places on Earth, where sonar and instinct were the only things that stood between you and death. I thought nothing could surprise me after 20 years stalking cold water, but space. Space is colder. And aliens. They didn't arrive with banners or beams of light. They didn't declare war or friendship. They watched. Silently, for weeks. Maybe months. We didn't know at first, but something felt off. It started with anomalies, tiny inconsistencies in the sky, just big enough for someone like Dr. Madison Chen to notice. She was the first, really. A researcher at one of the joint observation facilities in the Andes tracking gravitational microlensing data. She spotted patterns, stars flickering the wrong way, heat balloons in wavelengths that shouldn't be there. The world didn't take her seriously at first. Why would they? She was using weather satellites and old telescopes. But then she found more, and others started seeing it too. What she was proposing sounded insane. Cloaked ships orbiting Earth, but the data didn't lie. By the time her paper dropped, unexplained disruptions in localized gravitational fields, I had already been pulled into meetings with Homeland Security, NASA, and 3-letter agencies I hadn't even known existed. Something was up there, all right. Something watching us. It was about then that the probes disappeared. They didn't crash, didn't go dark. They just vanished. We lost telemetry from satellites and patterns, always within the same latitudinal band. It wasn't natural. It wasn't coincidence. And it wasn't us. So we adapted. That's the thing about humanity. We don't always know what we're doing, but we figure it out fast. And when the stakes are high, we evolve even faster. I'll be honest. Our technology was nowhere near what these aliens had. They were using quantum cloaks and gravity drives. We were still strapping rockets to metal tubes and calling them spacecraft. They had neural-linked ships that phased in and out of existence. We had satellites barely smart enough to survive a solar flare. But give a human a stick, and he'll figure out how to beat a tank with it. We didn't try to match their tech. We turned our own world into a weapon. Dr. Chen, she had this wild idea. What if, she said, we treat our global communications like a radar grid? You see, we'd been broadcasting TV, radio, and data into space for over a century. Every signal, from sitcom reruns to Wi-Fi pings, created a massive chaotic field of radiation around Earth. Noise, right? Wrong. She proposed we use it. We fed our entertainment networks through AI models to map irregularities. Static patterns, signal drop-offs, sudden harmonics. If something invisible passed through that cloud of human chaos, we'd see it. Within 2 days of reconfiguring, we had detection. Within a week, we had targets. The alien ships had cloaked themselves against traditional sensors, radiation shielding, light-bending hulls, quantum blur fields. But they hadn't planned on someone weaponizing YouTube or converting FM radio into sonar. We didn't need to see them. We felt them, like whales echolocating across a digital ocean. Then came Phase 2, magnetic field modulation. Earth's magnetic field is a beast, ancient, powerful, and chaotic. Most people don't think about it beyond compass needles and auroras, but Dr. Patel, a physicist at theorized we could amplify local anomalies. Think of it like ruffling the air so dust shows up. We created artificial magnetic pulses, small, harmless, but enough to see how cloaked ships responded. When they shimmered, we tracked. When they moved, we followed. We knew we'd been seen. The aliens tried to adjust. One by one, our sensors began going dark again. But not before we confirmed something terrifying. They were adapting too. What followed was a race neither side had planned for, one side with centuries of technology and the other with raw human stubbornness. They had tech. We had drive. And every time they countered our last trick, we invented a new one. We started reconfiguring defense systems. Nuclear submarines became orbital heat sinks. Missile tracking platforms were converted to deep space object interceptors. We tied together GPS, radio, weather balloons, and even amateur astronomer networks into one ad hoc early warning system. And when they escalated, we weaponized garbage. That's not hyperbole. One of our orbital trash compactors, essentially a glorified space dumpster, was retrofitted with repurposed military-grade thrusters and scrap metal warheads. The crew named it the really big gun. Crude, ugly, effective. When the aliens tried to sneak a scout drone into low orbit, it got slammed with 2 tons of fused titanium and rusted wrench heads moving at 5 kilometers per second. The message was clear. We see you, we can hit you, and we're not playing nice anymore. But the part that rattled them the most wasn't the tech. It was our behavior. They monitored us, sure. They watched our battle responses, our communications, our strategies. But what unnerved them was the laughter. When we downed that first drone, the crew cheered. Someone made a meme out of it. It spread faster than their encryption could track. Every victory, no matter how small, became a joke, a badge of honor, a story we shared. Remember the trash cannon? You mean the one with the duct tape barrel and the coffee pot targeting system? Hell yeah. That's human engineering, baby. We made them afraid, not because we were strong, but because we were unpredictable. Our tools were crude, but our creativity was lethal. They ran simulations, built models. But they couldn't predict a species that viewed failure as part of the process and treated war like a game of improvisational chess. And we weren't just fighting back, we were learning. Fast. Every alien countermeasure became a puzzle. Every engagement, a lesson. Their stealth tech, broken down and studied in Chen's lab. Their propulsion field, hijacked and rerouted to enhance our satellites. Their sensor arrays, jammed by modified microwave towers in rural Nebraska. We were disassembling 1,000 years of alien tech with duct tape sarcasm and sheer human will. The Galactic Council called it impossible. They shouldn't be able to detect us, one report said. Their tools are primitive, their minds untrained, their world chaotic, but they didn't understand. Our chaos was the weapon. We weren't unified, we weren't coordinated. But when it mattered, we came together, coders in Mumbai, radar techs in Alaska, soldiers in Arizona deserts, and deep sea captains like me. We pooled our crazy, desperate, brilliant ideas and made it work. By the time I was given command of the first Silent Star fleet, modified recon vessels with cloaking detection arrays, I understood the truth. This wasn't a war of weapons. It was a war of mindsets. They thought we were cavemen staring at the stars. We were wolves pretending to play fetch. Let me tell you a story. Our third confirmed intercept came over the Pacific. A cloaked ship had been shadowing a cargo satellite. We couldn't lock on it with lasers or missiles. Their quantum drift made targeting impossible. But they hadn't counted on saltwater spray. That's right, ocean particles. We launched a network of modified drones that ionized sea mist in the upper atmosphere. When the ship descended for scan, the salt clung to its stealth field like glitter on black velvet. We saw it. We fired. We hit. Their captain must have panicked because they jumped immediately. Bad move. Their exit signature overloaded our nearby communications buoy, but not before it transmitted a full energy profile. That one mistake. It gave us the breakthrough that let us track their entire fleet across the solar system. All because someone thought to launch humidifiers into orbit. That's what we are. We make weapons from garbage. We make detection systems from radio shows. We fight with memes and microwave ovens. And the worst part for them is that we like it. We enjoy the chaos, the challenge, the game of it all. When they tried to scare us with shows of power, we responded with dark humor, war songs, and satire. Our scientists made breakthroughs while sleep-deprived and running off cold pizza and spite. Our soldiers cracked jokes during battle briefings. Our engineers gave code names like Operation Glowstick and Tinfoil, reigned to classified anti-ship projects. And through it all, we adapted, we evolved. Not because we had better tools, because we had to. That's humanity in a nutshell. Backed into a corner, with nothing but sharp rocks and big dreams. We'll find a way to fight, not just survive, but thrive. But now, when alien scouts look toward Earth, they don't see primitives. They see predators, tinkerers, tricksters, innovators, survivors. They see a species that built war machines from junkyards, a species that turned movies into war doctrine, a species that saw first contact not as salvation or surrender, but as a challenge. We weren't ready for them, they weren't ready for us, and now they know. We are not a primitive world. We are the crucible, and we just started the fire. They thought it was just fiction. Movies, games, books, cartoons, crude simulations of impossible worlds. They thought our stories were harmless distractions from a primitive world, meaningless daydreams of a species still clinging to superstition and tribalism. They were wrong. I'm Dr. Madison Chen, lead researcher of Earth's First Contact Response Initiative. But long before that, I was just a kid who grew up watching alien invasion movies with my dad. He was a science teacher, a dreamer. He used to say, science fiction isn't about predicting the future, Maddie. It's about training your imagination for it. I didn't understand what he meant until much later. Now, looking back from where we are, the edge of galactic awareness, I realize that humanity has been running drills for this moment for generations. Not in laboratories or secret bunkers, but in living rooms, basements, movie theaters, and bedtime stories. Our fiction was never just fiction. It was preparation. I remember the day we confirmed the anomaly. We've been tracking a gravitational inconsistency above the southern hemisphere. At first, we thought it was a sensor error, something to do with satellite calibration. But then I overlaid historical fiction patterns. You read that right. I ran their movement patterns against scripts, film scripts, stories, invasion arcs, tactical scenarios imagined by Hollywood writers, indie game developers, and paranoid authors. And the match rate, 92%. It didn't make any sense, not at first. Why would an actual alien species follow patterns humans had made up for fun? Then it hit me. They weren't following our patterns. We'd been preparing for theirs. Every wargame, every sci-fi strategy sim, every what-if story. They were built on deep, primal human instincts, fear, curiosity, defense, sacrifice. All that fiction. It was just the surface. Underneath was a neural training network that spanned the entire planet. Humans had built a cultural simulation engine, an organic one, centuries before we even realized it. The aliens made first contact by not making contact at all. They watched, they cloaked, they studied us like bugs in a jar. And for a while, we didn't notice. But we noticed the holes, the patterns that didn't add up. We saw the stars behave wrong. We felt the magnetic disruptions. And most importantly, we recognized the story. That's when everything changed. It wasn't fear that took over. It was familiarity. I stood in a room with generals, scientists, hackers, and pilots, and I watched as someone pulled up a diagram of a cloaked satellite. Without hesitation, a kid from the gaming division, yes, we had one, pointed at the model and said, "That's just like in Sector Siege 3. You have to ping it with heat signatures and disrupt its cloak with resonance pulses." The room went quiet. No one laughed, because it worked. And that wasn't the only example. Someone else used lore from an old anime series to predict alien ship formations. A naval officer remembered a subplot from a sci-fi novel that mirrored the way the enemy vessels hid in orbit. One of the engineers recalled how an obscure indie game featured communication jamming through electromagnetic interference, a strategy that let us block their remote drones. We weren't pulling plans out of thin air. We were pulling them from stories, from fiction, from generations of wild, reckless imagination. The aliens didn't understand this at first. They had their models, all logic-based, all cold and mathematical. They classified us as primitive, dangerous in the abstract maybe, but not worth real fear. After all, we had no quantum drives, no interstellar weapons. We didn't even have unified global governance. But what we had was far more dangerous, chaotic creative intelligence. And that terrified them. We're the species that imagined space combat before we could even get to space. That wrote about nuclear weapons before we split the atom. That told stories of planetary defense before we had the means to look up and realize just how alone and how not alone we truly were. Our first advantage wasn't our weapons. It was recognition. We saw the shape of the threat, not because we understood their tech, but because we'd seen this movie before. We knew what to do. We created the first contact playbook in 72 hours. Not because we had brilliant planners, but because Reddit threads, fan fiction forums, and tabletop campaigns had already done the work for us. We just had to sift through them. A group of gamers in Finland had written a 100-page document detailing countermeasures against a hypothetical alien MP attack. A sci-fi author in Nigeria had published a serialized web novel with eerily accurate predictions about ship stealth tech. A fan-made mode of a space strategy game turned out to be the perfect simulation for orbital fleet maneuvering. So we used it all. We didn't care if it came from a comic book, a movie, a TikTok parody, or a fan wiki. If it could work, it was in. Nothing was off-limits. If it had logic, if it had potential, it was worth testing. Because our fiction had become a testing ground. A giant planetary sandbox for what-if scenarios. They thought we were playing, we were training. I remember one moment in particular, a turning point. The aliens had just revealed themselves, a show of force. One of their scout ships decloaked above the Atlantic, massive, sleek, pulsing with light. It hovered silently, radiating menace. We didn't send missiles. We sent a broadcast, a movie. We streamed Independence Day on all open frequencies. Full HUD. Subtitles in 6 languages. It was ridiculous. It was absurd. It was effective. They didn't know what to make of it. And while they tried to decipher why we'd show them a fictionalized attack against aliens, we locked onto their heat signature. We triangulated. We mapped their shadow field. And then we cloaked ourselves with jury-rigged stealth based on a sci-fi show from the 1990s. They'd come to study us, but our fiction had already studied them, and then came the memes. The memes were unexpected, but perhaps the most human of all responses. The moment our first strike succeeded, a modified weather satellite disrupting an alien drone, the internet exploded. Memes flew faster than official reports. They weren't just jokes, they were morale, strategy, coordination. A fan-made animation explaining how to disable alien clicking in 3 steps got 20 million views in 6 hours. It became training material. Soldiers watched TikToks on orbital jamming techniques between drills. Kids made VR reenactments that military tacticians started taking notes from. Every battle became a story. Every story became a lesson. Every lesson became a strategy. We weren't just surviving. We were iterating. Fiction had trained us for failure, for loss, for sacrifice, and most importantly, for adaptation. The aliens didn't have stories like ours. Oh, they had data. They had archives. They had education. But they didn't dream of war the way we did. They hadn't simulated billions of outcomes across centuries of cultural storytelling. They hadn't imagined every kind of first contact, peaceful, violent, tragic, romantic, cynical, comedic. We had. That was our real weapon. Imagination backed by experience, chaos sculpted by narrative. The ability to look into the unknown and say, we've been here before, in our minds. And once we realized that, we started winning. Faster than anyone thought possible. We stopped using terms like primitive. We stopped trying to mimic their tech. We started asking different questions. Not, how do we match them? But, what did we already imagine that could counter this? We built sonic disruptors based on comic book concepts. We tested combat formations lifted from old RTS games. We modified railguns using schematics found in a fan-made space opera forum. And when they launched a mass stealth assault on our orbital defenses, we were already waiting, not because of satellites, but because someone remembered a novel where that exact tactic had been used. They thought our weakness was a lack of advancement. It was actually our strength, because fiction isn't linear. It leaps, it experiments, it teaches failure without cost. And we've been failing gloriously in our stories for generations. So when reality hit, we didn't freeze. We wrote the ending. After the third major engagement, one of their captains surrendered. I sat in on the debrief. His translator struggled to keep up with the aliens' confusion. "You do not have the means," the captain said, voice metallic and strange. "You should not have anticipated our strategy." I leaned forward. "We've seen it before." He blinked. "Impossible. This is first contact." I smiled. "Not to us." I showed him a screen, movie posters, book covers, game footage. All older than I was, all predicting parts of their tactics. His mandibles clicked in a strange rhythm. "This is entertainment?" "No," I said. "This was practice." There's a line in one of those old sci-fi shows I loved as a kid. The hero facing impossible odds says, "I've played this level before." That's what it felt like. Like the universe threw us into the final boss fight, and we realized somehow we'd been grinding XP our whole lives. Storytelling was our training montage. Fiction wasn't just escape, it was evolution. Now, I work with both sides, humans and aliens, trying to build a future from the ashes of fiction made real. Galactic Council is reeling from the idea that stories, chaotic, illogical, emotional stories, could be the most powerful form of preparation in existence. I told them we write our fears, but we also write our strengths. We imagine horrors and overcome them. We dream monsters and defeat them. We tell underdog stories and win them. They thought our fiction made us fragile. It made us ready. So the next time someone laughs at comic books, scoffs at space operas, or says video games rot your brain, remember this: those stories saved Earth. And they're still saving it, because we're still writing, still preparing, still dreaming. And now, the galaxy knows. Humanity doesn't wait for the future. We invent it. The ocean was where I learned to hunt. Long before I found myself drifting silently through the shadow of Earth's moon in a retrofitted orbital stealth vessel, I stalked nuclear submarines beneath the surface of the Pacific. Back then, our battlefield was dark, cold, and crushing. Sound was everything. You learned to move slowly, to listen harder than you breathed, and to kill before they even knew you were there. When the aliens came, they thought they had the void to themselves. They didn't realize they were playing in our backyard, only bigger, colder, and with more stars. My name is Commander Blake Torres, callsign Ghost. I used to command the U.S. Raidridge, a fast attack sub. Now, I command the Silent Star, one of the first human vessels specifically designed for anti-cloaked operations in space. We call it Silent Service McHugh, but it's really just a submarine that learned how to fly. The aliens thought in vectors and gravity wells. They treated space like a chessboard, predictable moves, calculated thrust burns, formation tactics based on numerical superiority and technological dominance. They didn't understand that for humans, space isn't chess. It's an ocean, and we're the apex predators in it. The aliens came cloaked, scanning silently, maneuvering just outside of visible and electromagnetic ranges. Their tech was beautiful, sleek ships that glided like shadows, drives that bent space-time around them, sensors that shouldn't have been detectable by anything short of a quantum AI. We detected them with modified fishing sonar. Yeah, real story. You see, when our early warning satellites started picking up noise anomalies, faint ripples, and cosmic radiation, I got pulled into an emergency Pentagon session. Some analyst named Jarvis pulled up charts, radar echoes, and high-orbit telemetry and said, "It looks like acoustic propagation in salt water, but these are neutrino flux patterns." I said one word, wakes. That's when it hit us. Space, like the deep ocean, isn't truly empty. There's dust, radiation, gravity, distortions, plasma eddies, and ships. Even cloaked alien ones leave a trail. You just have to know where to look and how to listen. Submariners knew. So we adapted everything we had: passive sensor arrays, wide-frequency magnetometers, and algorithms from Cold War sonar systems. We tuned our satellites to listen for space like we listened for Soviet boomers under Arctic ice. Then we built ships that could hunt in that kind of silence. The Silent Star wasn't much to look at. Its hull was ugly, part salvaged shuttle core, part decommissioned space station module. But it had two things no other ship had: a prototype graviton drift engine that produced almost no heat, and my crew, former submariners, radar techs, and tactical gamers. Yeah, gamers. We didn't pull our pilots from traditional Air Force stock. We recruited from esports leagues, because flying in 3 dimensions is one thing, fighting in 3 dimensions is another. And when you're in a battle where up is just a direction and not a rule, you need people who understand how to think in space. People who grew up playing zero-gravity PvP sims. People who spent thousands of hours in VR combat, learning how to predict motion, plot ambushes, and run coordinated attacks through chaos. Gamers, nerds, sub-hunters, and me, a washed-up naval officer with a bad attitude and too many scars. That was our team, and we were going to war. The first kill came near Saturn. They had a scout vessel slipping between ring shadows using the ice debris as cover. We had deployed a series of passive sensor drones, modified weather satellites, and cold storage capsules tied together with optical fiber. Their job? Listen, wait. I called it the net. The aliens must have thought they were invisible. They weren't. They were loud. Not in sound, but in disturbance. Every time their drive surged, it pushed debris out of the way. Every time their cloak recalibrated, it left a dip in the neutrino field, a flicker, a blip. Barely noticeable, unless you were looking for it the way a sonar tech looks for cavitation bubbles in thermal layers. When we moved in, we didn't announce ourselves. We didn't fire warning shots. We ghosted them. Slid in on silent burn, cold thrust, no emissions. Our systems ran dark, relying only on mechanical switches and optical data lines. When we reached firing position, we launched a magnetic pulse mine. No explosion, just a snare. It grabbed their engine harmonics like a net catches a shark. They tried to blink away. They couldn't. And when their cloak failed, we hit them with a kinetic spike round. No heat, no flash, just silence. Afterward, we replayed the maneuver on the ship's internal comms, complete with commentary, slow month, and VR overlays. Half the crew laughed. The other half tagged it as Tactical Pattern Ghost Delta. Within 2 days, that footage was passed to every active space defense command on Earth. We weren't just killing aliens, we were teaching how to kill them. They adapted, of course. Every time we scored a hit, they changed tactics. But we changed faster. We learned faster. That's always been our advantage. We're not stronger, not smarter, not even better organized. We just don't stop learning, especially in war. We started using old tactics in new ways. Bait formations, decoy signal flares, tethered drones using phased frequency broadcast loops to simulate ship movements. Once, we used a collection of ancient Soviet satellites to fake a heat bloom that tricked an alien fleet into revealing their entire position. We fought dirty, we fought clever, we fought like humans, and the aliens couldn't figure it out. Why would anyone sacrifice a ship to trap 2 others? Why launch in suboptimal orbits? Why fire inert rounds just to cloud sensor readings? Because that's what you do when you've spent centuries perfecting submarine ambush doctrine and feeding it into every modern combat simulator from Navy Strike to Orbital Ops VR. And we were just getting started. One engagement, the Battle of Echo Ridge, became the turning point. 3 of their warships cornered us near the asteroid belt, outnumbered, outgunned, no support. We had 4 vessels, Silent Star, the Butcher's Son, Wraith 9, and Glass Widow, all human hybrids. Retrofitted chemical engines married with captured alien propulsion cores. I pulled the fleet into formation Echo Sierra 7, a maneuver we'd lifted straight out of a video game mode. The idea was to use the debris fields as cover, swing tight orbits, and power drift into attack positions using gravitational slingshots. We cut every system we didn't need, switched to manual targeting, fed the pilots caffeine pills, and blasted synthwave into their comms. No one spoke except to confirm kills. We drifted like sharks. And when the aliens fired, they hit nothing but shadows, because we were already behind them. Glass Widow was the first to strike, a full salvo of retrofitted magnetic lances. Wraith 9 followed with a maneuver that should have ripped her hull apart but didn't, because her pilot had calculated the stress curve using a fan-made physics calculator from a VR sim community. When the enemy flagship spun to flee, we were waiting. I gave the order, torch 'em. The Butcher's Son dropped out of the shadow of a rotating asteroid, fired 2 graviton spears point blank, then flew straight through the debris cloud. The aliens never had a chance. We lost 1 ship. They lost everything. We called it a victory. But what it really was a test run. And we passed. After that, the aliens began calling us something new in intercepted transmissions. Not primitive, not threat, but hunters. The void was ours now. We used to think of space as exploration. They thought of it as control, but we treated it as a battlefield. And not just any battlefield, a deep one. One where silence kills, where instinct outweighs sensors, where experience and imagination matter more than raw power. They had advanced systems, we had intuition, they had formations, we had chaos. And every time they thought they'd figured us out, we broke the rules again. Now, when I sit in my command chair, watching the sensor boards glow with echoes, I don't see a star map. I see sonar, I see shadows, I see patterns, and I smile, because I know what they don't. That silence is where humans thrive. We made our name crawling through mud, hiding in jungles, diving beneath polar ice, building kill boxes out of fog and patience. Now we've taken those instincts to space, and there's nowhere they can hide that we won't find, because to us, space isn't foreign. It's just the next ocean. And we are the silent service, still hunting, still adapting, still learning, and still very, very dangerous. They never meant for us to understand it. The technology they left behind, the cloaked probes, the propulsion cores, the quantum circuitry, wasn't just alien in design. It was alien in logic, built on principles we hadn't discovered yet, materials we couldn't synthesize, energy we hadn't learned to harness. And they figured that would keep us safe. Or maybe just contained. They were wrong. We didn't understand the rules, so we broke them. I'm Dr. Madison Chen, theoretical physicist, systems engineer, and, apparently, war criminal, depending on which Galactic Council tribunal you ask. I wasn't supposed to lead Earth's alien tech division. I was supposed to be writing white papers on gravitational anomalies and teaching undergrads about paradox loops. Then we shot down one of their drones. Then we opened it, and everything changed. The first thing you need to understand is that alien tech doesn't come with instructions. There were no manuals, no language files, just rows of crystalline data matrices, self-modifying circuits, and propulsion drives that didn't make any damn sense. The first piece we got our hands on, a damaged navigation core, nearly killed 4 researchers at Langley. We plugged it into a lab's power supply and triggered a spatial anomaly that made half the room loop 3 seconds into the past for 10 straight D-loop, until someone noticed the same cup of coffee falling over and over again on security footage. Once we stabilized it, I asked the lead engineer how the core functioned. He just shrugged. Magic. That was our baseline, so we threw out everything we thought we knew and started from scratch. We brought in hackers, welders, indie inventors, rogue physicists, and ex-NASA mechanics. We had one rule. It works, it stays. If it breaks, figure out why and try again. We weren't operating in a lab anymore. We were working out of a converted aircraft hangar in Nevada, one of the original test sites for stealth bombers. It stank of oil, sweat, and solder, and it became the birthplace of something entirely new. We called it garage engineering. Imagine giving a caveman an iPhone. Most species would stare at it, declare it too advanced, and wait for someone else to figure it out. Humans? We pry it open with a screwdriver, hook it to a car battery, and ask, what happens if we plug this into a microwave? That's how we treated alien technology. And somehow, it worked. Take the Mobius reactor, our first successful hybrid energy system. The alien tech relied on something we came to call quantum loop cycling, a continuous energy feedback mechanism built into curved dimensional wiring. It operated in nonlinear time. Don't ask me to explain that further. I still don't fully get it. What we did understand was that it needed symmetrical inputs, but our tools weren't symmetrical. Our power grids fluctuated. Our converters were dirty. We couldn't generate the necessary harmonics to stabilize the cycle. So one of our junior engineers, a kid named Deshaun who used to build illegal street racing engines in his garage, rigged a workaround using an old NASCAR turbine, 2 aluminum forks, and an amplifier built from guitar pedals. And it worked. The Mobius reactor didn't just power the lab, it powered the entire base for 3 days before we had to shut it down because it was too efficient. Too efficient. We made a perpetual energy loop with car parts and duct tape. That was just the beginning. Once we knew we could force alien tech to cooperate with our junk, we went all in. The propulsion cores were next. Their drives didn't function on chemical thrust or standard gravitic pulse. Instead, they bent the probability of mass existing in a specific space, essentially shifting the likelihood of movement instead of applying force. Sounds wild, right? It is. But you know what's wilder. We boosted its output by 27% using scrap metal from a 1978 microwave oven and 5 meters of copper wiring stolen from an HVAC unit. No, I'm not joking. We didn't try to understand the full theory behind how it worked. We just asked the most important human question. What if? What if we break the failsafe? What if we bypass the limiter? What if we cross the wires backward? Other species develop methodically. They test. They model. They follow safe trajectories from one advancement to the next. We don't. We sprint toward the edge of the cliff and start building the bridge on the way down. And somehow, the bridge holds. We developed a new kind of weapon entirely by accident. It started as an experiment with probability engines trying to fold space around a projectile instead of firing it. The test was supposed to displace a bowling ball 3 feet forward without momentum. It instead caused the bowling ball to exist in all forward positions simultaneously for half a second, then vanish entirely. We had just built our first probability bomb. Later tests confirmed it. The device didn't explode. It collapsed local possibility into a singular outcome, non-existence. Our enemies didn't just get destroyed. They got erased. We were horrified. Then we got curious. Because that's the other thing they never understood about humans. We're not afraid of dangerous ideas. We run toward them. One of my favorite moments from those early months came when a visiting general asked me if our hybrid ship prototypes had passed safety inspections. I just stared at him and said, "General, we built the main engine stabilizer using a trampoline frame, leftover alien casing, and a leaf blower." He looked horrified. But the prototype, it flew. High orbit. Smooth launch, landed with 8% fuel efficiency gain. They'd given us the keys to the universe. And we hot-wired the engine with household tools. Of course, it wasn't all victories. There were failures. One test ship spontaneously inverted its own gravity field and flattened like a pancake. One prototype defense drone gained rudimentary AI, declared itself the king of Las Vegas, and attempted to gamble its way into power before we fried its chip. But every failure taught us more than 100 alien schematics ever could. We learned by breaking. We learned by pushing. We learned by daring to ignore every rule the galaxy swore by. And that's what made us dangerous. Because while other civilizations treat advanced tech with reverence, we treat it like a challenge. When the Council finally realized what we were doing, truly doing, they panicked. They'd always assumed primitive species couldn't misuse high tech because they wouldn't understand it. They never imagined we'd skip understanding altogether and go straight to modification. They called us reckless, unstable, unfit for technological ascension, but they couldn't argue with the results. By the time they assembled a counterfleet to contain Earth's hybrid warships, we had already built 15 more, each one unique. No standardization, no formal classification, just beautifully dangerous chaos, each ship a Frankenstein's monster of alien and human thought. And when that fleet reached lunar orbit, we were ready. They expected shields. We gave them phase-spliced armor reinforced with rebar and synthetic bone matrix. They expected plasma cannons. We gave them graviton hammers, ship-mounted kinetic drivers that used compressed electromagnetic fields to throw dark matter like fastballs. They expected strategy. We gave them madness. 100 human ships, all piloted by outliers and freaks, submarine commanders, indie game developers, ex-engineers, and VR addicts, all moving in perfect chaos, unorthodox, unpredictable, unstoppable, because each of them had grown up imagining this war, training for it. Not in military schools, but in basements, at game tournaments, at midnight over comic books and online fan theories. And now, they were using that madness to win. I watched the final moments of that battle from my command center at Area 51, now rebranded the Innovation Crucible. It used to be a myth. Now it was the heart of Earth's technological revolution. We had whiteboards filled with fan art and post-it notes that said things like, "What if time moved sideways? And can we weaponize dreams?" And you know what? Some of them worked. Because we never stop asking, what if? Because we don't worship the rulebook. We burn it. That's why we won. That's why we keep winning. Because we look at alien tech and see potential, not perfection. We see what it could be if we're willing to risk it all and build something new. And if that means welding a probability engine to a toaster coil, then get the soldering iron. Because humans don't innovate by climbing steps. We innovate by lighting the staircase on fire and building a jetpack out of spare parts. So if you're watching us, whoever you are, wondering what humans might do with your sacred relics, your forbidden devices, your unimaginable machines, let me be clear. We're not here to preserve your legacy. We're here to reinvent it and then make it better. They called it the Final Countdown. Not the name of the operation, not some military code or tactical directive. Just a song, a synth-heavy 1980s arena rock anthem. That's what we played on every open channel as our ships moved into formation for one of the biggest space battles in human history. Some alien cultures communicate through pheromones, others use sonic harmonics or complex data bursts. We used music, blaring, unapologetic music, and it shook them to their core. Because it wasn't just noise, it was confidence. We were outgunned, outnumbered, technologically inferior in every quantifiable way. But we weren't scared. We were hyped. And that's when they realized what kind of species they were dealing with. Not warriors, not tacticians, but storytellers, gamers, jokers, and predators who smiled when they bled. I'm Commander Blake Torres, call sign Ghost. I've commanded human warships in both oceans and orbit. I've faced pressure that crushes bones and vacuum that tears them apart. But nothing ever felt quite like that moment, flying past the curve of Jupiter, watching our enemy's fleet drift in tight formation just beyond the shadow of Ganymede, and knowing, deep in my bones, that we were going to win. Not because we were stronger, but because we made it fun. Let me back up. The Galactic Coalition had sent their largest task force yet, 300 advanced warships equipped with tech that, just a year earlier, we couldn't even begin to comprehend. Quantum integrated propulsion, adaptive shielding, predictive targeting systems that responded before you moved. We had about 90 ships, most of them cobbled together from human vessels and alien tech we barely understood. Half our fleet had been repaired with scrap metal, salvaged parts, and whatever we could get our hands on. One ship, the Blue Waffle, was quite literally powered by a reverse-engineered quantum drive mounted onto a bull collar from Detroit. They came expecting surrender. We gave them a soundtrack. The idea wasn't mine. It was Chen's, Dr. Madison Chen, scientist, lunatic, legend. She was the one who suggested broadcasting music on all known enemy channels. Psych warfare, she said, sipping coffee like we weren't about to fight for the fate of our planet. They scan all frequencies. Let's give them something to remember us by. I laughed. What? Like Ride of the Valkyries? She smirked. Too obvious. I want something that gets stuck in their head. Something cheesy. Make them wonder if we're crazy or just really, really confident. We ran a poll. Thousands of soldiers, engineers, pilots, and civilians voted. The winner. The final countdown by Europe. So that's what we played over and over again as our fleet approached. And that's when we saw it. In their movement, in their hesitation, in the slight delay before their first counter-move. Fear. Because no one laughs like that before they die. No one sings when the odds are against them, unless they know something you don't. The battle started at 400 UTC. They opened with a spread of long-range quantum projectiles designed to disable sensors and blind targeting systems. On paper, it was flawless. But we weren't using sensors. We were flying by instinct, gut, and manual control. Our lead ships took the blast head-on, intentionally. That was part of the show. The Blue Waffle and Silent Star drifted through the cloud, engines dark, hulls glowing with residual plasma. The alien fleet reoriented, trying to lock onto new positions. Too late. We were already inside their formation. We moved like wolves. Erratic, chaotic, beautifully human. We didn't obey standard formations. We didn't rely on AIs or predictive combat simulations. We used intuition and memes. That's not a joke. Our attack pattern names. All meme references. PP Leapfrog. Chad Vector. Hold my beer. Maneuver. You haven't lived until you've ordered a hold my beer in the middle of a space battle. It involves boosting past 3 enemy ships with active decoys, dumping your entire power core into a fake thermal signature, and then ejecting the command pod into a nearby ice cluster while your ship explodes in the enemy's face. It's stupid, it's reckless, and it works, because humans don't just survive chaos, we weaponize it. Halfway through the battle we were losing ships, fast. The AM's brick took a railgun hit to its midsection and cracked in 2. The goofy bastard got caught in a pincer move and vented atmosphere for 20 seconds before her captain self-destructed, taking 2 alien cruisers with her. Every loss was felt, but every loss was used. We started naming kill zones after fallen ships, making jokes about them in real-time comms. Streaming audio logs filled with gallows humor and last words like, "Tell my ex-wife she still sucks." The enemy didn't understand. They couldn't process it. Why were we demoralized? Why were we laughing? It wasn't laughter without pain. We knew what we were risking. But humans process trauma in strange ways. Some cry, some rage, and some make jokes. Share memes, sing dumb songs, while facing annihilation. And when we started making trophies, recovered alien debris that our engineers spray painted and hung from their bunks, that's when they started to break. One of our pilots, a kid barely out of flight school, painted the words "Get wrecked" on his hull in radioactive ink. He flew straight through enemy lines and dropped a payload made from repurposed mining charges. They called it suicide. We called it the meme strike. By day 2, our losses were at 40%, but their formations had collapsed. They weren't moving in sync anymore. The predictive systems had been scrambled by our erratic tactics. Our AI mimicked random human motion, our ships broadcasted false emotional signals, and we lured their captains into traps using old video game patterns. We called in our reserve fleet, the Garage Ghosts, ships so unstable and weird, they hadn't passed any safety tests, but were too creative not to use. One had armor made from satellite dishes. Another used paintball cannons as kinetic flares. They were unpredictable, and that made them unstoppable. Because the enemy couldn't simulate us, every time they ran a model, it failed, because we were humans, and humans don't make sense. The battle ended when they tried to execute what we later learned was a quantum net collapse, a last resort tactic meant to trap an enemy fleet in a gravitational lock, rendering them immobile. But we wanted them to try that. Chen had predicted it 5 weeks earlier based on an alien drama series we intercepted. They'll try to end it clean, she said. They don't do messy, so we planned for messy. When they activated the net, we overloaded our hybrid drives, intentionally triggering cascade failures in our unstable reactors. That energy burst surged through the net and shattered it. Half their fleet lost propulsion. The rest were stranded in gravitational echo zones we'd set up days before using disguised satellites. We boxed them in, and then we turned up the music. Victory was declared at 652 UC, but we didn't cheer like conquerors. We celebrated like players. Ships threw victory parties. Pilots broadcast their kill counts like high scores. Crews exchanged stories, gifts, and digital badges. One squadron recorded a parody video set to "Don't Stop Believin'," and somewhere in the galaxy, a dozen alien species watched the playback and realized the most terrifying thing of all: we had fun. They weren't used to that. They weren't used to a species that enjoyed battle without needing to worship it. That turned loss into laughter, pain into strategy. That fought with art, rhythm, chaos, and memes. They had logic. We had style. A week after the battle, we intercepted a transmission from a foreign captain to the Galactic Council. It translated to, "They sing as they kill us. They dance as they burn. We came to conquer. They came to perform." How do you fight a species that treats war like theater and death like a game? We don't. We don't fight like that. We live like that. We're not braver than anyone else. We're not more advanced. We're not even unified. But when it comes to survival, we don't just fight. We make it unforgettable. And that terrifies them more than our weapons ever could. Because to the galaxy, war is a tragedy. But to humans, sometimes, it's just another level to beat. They had never seen anything like us. Not in all their eons of watching the stars, charting the rise and fall of species, calculating civilizations by cold logarithms and measured progression, the Galactic Council had entire galaxies mapped down to the mineral veins of dead moons. They could predict cultural development within 3 decimal places and calculate extinction probabilities like insurance actuaries. But nothing prepared them for humanity. We didn't follow the curve. We didn't obey the rules. We skipped steps, rewrote the textbook, then burned it. Then made a movie about it, and watched it together with popcorn while our ships rewired alien propulsion drives with duct tape and car batteries. We'd come expecting to conquer or enlighten a primitive world. Instead, they found us volatile, brilliant, relentless, joyful chaos in motion. And we made a choice that changed everything. We didn't fight for conquest. We fought to prove that we had something worth protecting, not just Earth, but us, as we are. Flawed, wild, hilarious, terrifying, and absolutely unforgettable. The war was over, but the Council was left broken in more ways than one. Their fleets were scattered, their pride shattered, their doctrine had failed. But more than that, they were afraid, not just of our weapons, but of our potential. Because for the first time in the galaxy's long, cold history, they saw a species that didn't just use technology, we transformed it. That didn't just wage war, we remixed it. That didn't just endure, we thrived in chaos and learned from every single defeat. They realized humanity wasn't just dangerous because of our unpredictability. We were dangerous because we made everything useful, even our failures. It started slowly. Peace negotiations initiated not by the Council, but by us. Through Madison Chen and Blake Torres, scientists and soldiers, storytellers and survivors, Chen walked into that chamber with a smile and a flash drive. "What is this?" one counselor asked. "A copy of every piece of science fiction humanity ever made," she said. "Everything from 1897 onward. Films, novels, games, audiologs, memes, the works." "Why?" She leaned forward, rested her hand on the table, and answered, "Because we've been planning for you for over 100 years. And now we'd like to stop planning for war and start planning for peace." They didn't respond for 3 minutes. That's how long it took their neural processors to scan the data. And even after skimming just a fraction of our creative output, they understood the truth. We weren't unpredictable because we were chaotic. We were unpredictable because we imagined everything. From that moment on, Earth was no longer labeled a developing civilization. It was classified as a protected anomaly, a term that meant, in essence, do not touch, do not provoke, do not underestimate, because provoking humanity didn't end in surrender or retreat. It ended in humanity, turning your own technology into a garage-built superweapon and naming it something stupid like the Quantum Eater 3000. We didn't just fight back, we made it fun. We didn't just survive, we learned how to thrive in the most hostile environment in the galaxy, other people's expectations. I remember standing with Chen on the surface of Mars during the first joint Human-Alien Engineering Summit. We were watching a mixed team, half human, half alien, building a prototype hybrid reactor that could power an entire moon. "What do you think they see when they look at us now?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. She was staring at one of the alien engineers, a crystalline species that once tried to vaporize our solar array. The alien was laughing. Actually laughing in their own frequency-modulated way, as a human technician showed them how to reroute power with a copper spoon. "I think," she said quietly, "they finally see what we've always known." "What's that?" "That we're not here to conquer. We're not here to impress. We're here to build. And sometimes, that means blowing a few things up first." Peace didn't come easily. Not all species were ready to accept us. Some still saw us as a virus, a chaotic mutation in the galactic system. Others feared we'd bring our cultural pollution, our messy ideologies, our endless stream of entertainment that didn't make sense but somehow held nations together. And they were right to worry. Because that is who we are, we don't make sense. But we do make progress. And we carry with us the most dangerous weapon in the universe. Belief that impossible things are worth trying anyway. That belief built cathedrals. It put footprints on the moon. It gave us stories like Star Trek and Mass Effect and Ender's Game, not just as entertainment, but as training exercises for future generations. We taught our children to imagine aliens, not just to fear them, but to understand them. To ask questions, to think bigger. So when first contact came, we weren't caught off guard, we were ready, we were waiting. The Council eventually issued a universal law. No civilization may engage with Earth without undergoing full cultural adaptation review. Not to protect humanity, but to protect themselves. Why? Because we turned their own logic upside down. They evolved slowly. We jumped ahead by dreaming faster than they could think. They were safe. We were curious. They perfected. We hacked. They feared failure. We treated it like a rite of passage. And for all their power, they had no answer for that. That's the legacy of what happened. Not the weapons we built, not the ships we flew, not the enemies we outmaneuvered, but the mindset we carried. We didn't win the war because we had better tools. We won because we never stopped asking, what if? What if we plugged this in wrong? What if we tried the risky thing? What if we turned the whole battle into a joke and dared them to take it seriously? What if we believed in the impossible? And that, right there, is the real story. It's not about aliens. It's not about space. It's not even about victory. It's about us, about what humanity becomes when the stakes are highest, when the world is watching, or burning, or both. We become reckless. We become passionate. We become brilliant in ways no one, not even ourselves, expected. And it's not fiction. It never was. We train for this not with weapons, but with wonder. We practiced for this not in war rooms, but in bedrooms filled with books, screens, and midnight theories scribbled on napkins. We prepared, unknowingly, collectively, through story. That's what makes us terrifying, and that's what makes us essential. Because in the end, the universe doesn't need another flawless empire or sterile utopia. It needs someone who's willing to try the stupid idea, the unproven one, the one that just might save everyone. Even if it involves duct tape, loud music, and a whole lot of caffeine. So, what's the lesson here? It's not just that humans are dangerous. It's that our greatest strength, the thing the galaxy feared and now respects, was never our tech, our power, or our fire. It was our ability to dream louder than logic, to laugh when others flee, to write the ending no one expects. And maybe, just maybe, that's what makes us not just human, but necessary. Because in a galaxy full of certainty, we're the wild card, the punchline, the underdog that rewrites the rules, the storytellers who make fiction real, and we're not going anywhere.